Now here's a short film from Adam Curtis, the man behind The Century of the Self, The Power of Nightmares and The Trap. Well, we seem to have lost the...
This is a short and possibly unfair history of the rise and fall of the television journalist as a hero. If you go back 50 years, television journalists were creeps, above all to politicians. They followed the rule of their boss, Lord Reith. The BBC, he said, is for the people. The government is for the people, so it follows that the BBC must be for the government.
Well now, Mr. Eden, with your very considerable experience of foreign affairs, it's quite obvious that I should start by asking you something about the international situation today, or perhaps you would prefer to talk about home. When shall it be?
With the questioning of authority in the 1960s, this began to change. But it was Watergate that transformed everything. Two journalists, Woodward and Bernstein, exposed corruption at the highest level of the US government. And suddenly, television journalists realized what they had been born to do: to expose the dark heart of government, big business and bureaucracy. It was the start of a heroic age in which television journalists revealed the sinister forces that we couldn't see and those in power wanted to hide from us. Out of it came much great journalism. But then an event happened that made it clear that despite their heroic confidence, the journalists didn't know everything. The Berlin Wall suddenly collapsed. It was one of the biggest events of the 20th century, and none of them had seen it coming.
Here is a brick from the Berlin Wall, a souvenir from your trip here.
Jens Reich, look at it and tell us what you think tonight.
With the end of the Cold War, the TV journalists were thrown into a new and terrifying world, where all the old certainties of good and bad, right and left, began to blur in an unnerving way. And it destroyed their ability to tell us their simple moral fables. So as a way out, they came up with a new theory. They had actually been patronizing and elitist when they had lectured us about corruption in high places. Instead, all stories in future should reflect our experience, and attempts to explain why things happen were abandoned. A classic example was a new type of investigative journalist, Donal McIntyre. He set out to show what it was like to get mugged. He took his mobile phone onto the streets of Brixton. For 3 nights he desperately tried to get it snatched, until finally someone gave him his story.
Sorry, I'm looking for Stockwell Tube. Stockwell Tube. To phone. Oh, fucking hell! Oh, my mobile's gone! My mobile's gone! My mobile's gone!
And as Donal cried, we knew that he was sharing our pain. But there was one final step in this transformation of journalism. We cut out the middleman, the journalist.
If you've got a story to tell, we'd love to hear from you. The email address, as always, yournews.
Commentators, who are they? Well, they're you.
Now, our presenters plead with us to send in our photos and videos. They proudly present it as a new kind of open democracy. But in reality, it's something very different. Because the journalists don't understand what is going on in today's complex, chaotic world, they have had to revert to their old habit of finding someone in authority who will tell them. But this time, it's not the politicians, it's us, the audience, that they've turned to. The only problem is that we don't have a clue what's going on, particularly because the journalists have given up on their job of explaining the world to us.
Time waits for no man, but if you think time's an impatient bugger, it's got nothing on the news, which doesn't just not wait, but actively runs away giggling in the opposite direction. Fortunately, someone's keeping pace, and that someone is called Mr. 24-Hour Rolling News. When monumental events occur, Rolling News comes into its own, imparting information you really want to know. But events of that magnitude are thankfully few and far between. Most of the time, there's not much happening, which means 24-hour rolling news channels have to fill in with all sorts of embarrassing shit.
Sky News has been given exclusive access to the home of the terror suspects accused of attacks in London and Glasgow.
Yes, and here's their reporter to proudly show you around an empty house.
3 months of police work has stripped the house back almost to its shell. Carpets have been taken up, radiators stripped from walls. The men's belongings have been taken away. Left behind are items belonging to the landlady, Sofas, a hoover and a ticking clock.
Yeah, speaking of ticking clocks, you know. And while they're twiddling their thumbs, half their mistakes are visible. It's a bit like Acorn Antiques. You can hear producers shouting at translators.
Carry on translating, please.
Sure. Watch guests pulling faces when they think they're off air.
And fair weather, thank you.
Enjoy countless fun technical difficulties.
Okay, Calab. Thanks very much for your time.
2 NATO soldiers have been killed while... There we are. Get rid of Palab.
And if you're really lucky, see floor managers desperately shoving pundits into frame.
And author of Iran Today, Dilip Hero. Dilip, that's always nice to see you. What do they want? What do Iran want? They want a goodwill gesture, apparently.
I mean, Iran?
Yes.
Have they just shaken this guy awake in a shop doorway?
No, Dilip, I was asking you what you think.
Fortunately, every so often something important seems to happen, and the news reacts like a startled woodland creature craning its neck to see what's going on, even if it turns out to be nothing. For instance, in June this year, something happened in New York which for a short period of time looked a bit 9/11. But it soon turned out it wasn't. It was a steam pipe exploding.
It looks like smoke superficially, and that, of course, is almost a superficial repeat of the image from September the 11th.
No, it's superficially a catastrophe.
And just a short distance from Ground Zero, where the Twin Towers were, of course, and that's the significance.
Yeah, you run with that. You convince yourself. Often when something major does happen, Rolling News turns itself into 24, splitting the screen into segments all the better to amuse us. When future Mushroom Cloud fan Mahmoud Ahmadinejad announced he was releasing the British sailors as a lovely Easter gift, it was important but visually dull, so Sky News accompanied his speech with a live feed of some people in a Cornish pub, who apparently knew one of the sailors, reacting to it.
We've got the beer lined up. Roy's just phoned, Nathan's dad's just phoned. He's going to leave work and go and disappear somewhere, but he's got a pint there on the bar if he wants it.
Breaking news, Roy's left work early, he's got a pint on the bar. One-off events are one thing, but what they really relish is an unfolding story, preferably one that lets them hit the dramatic breaking news button. Although, of course, any story unfolds if you report it step by step. Rolling News uses this tactic all the time, breaking stories at incremental degrees, sometimes quite tastelessly.
We can now tell you that he's actually unconscious and his kidneys have stopped working.
The Madeleine McCann case has provided perfect material for the Rolling News stations, an emotive, unfolding hyper-narrative jam-packed with twists and turns and even celebrity endorsements, and it plays on people's darkest fears. From the off, the stations were all over it like a rash, dispatching reporters to the scene, but after over 100 days, they were running out of things to report. And then things changed. The parents were given a Guido suspect status, and the news went berserk, standing around for hours outside Portimao police station, so we'd see every second of the McCanns arriving or leaving, or both. Mostly, though, they showed us a closed door. On BBC News 24, the cameraman went crazy, and the anchorman forgot reporter Jane Hill's name.
Kate, if we can just go through a couple of things.
No, that's Jane. Kate's the Guido.
It's quite odd, Sally, to have so many people just standing around. Some of them really for hours on end just standing.
Yeah, that is odd.
And they just stand and watch and wait, and they take photographs, and some of them have got home video cameras.
And some have got satellite link-ups. Even pundits criticising press coverage of the case were ignored in the stampede to keep us all staring.
Gentlemen, I just want to take our viewers over to Portugal. This is the live scene there. We think that we're just seeing some movement there. We think there's a possibility that Jerry McCann might be coming out.
This went on for 2 days. 2 days of repeated footage of a closed door.
Nothing has happened here for 7 hours, and yet still there are huge crowds.
Which you're a part of.